What if the very fabric of your family, the place you've been conditioned to seek comfort, belonging, and unconditional love, is actually a subtle battlefield where one player consistently holds a secret, devastating advantage? Imagine every holiday gathering, every inheritance discussion, every casual family call. What if these aren't just innocent interactions, but carefully orchestrated skirmishes where you, the seeker, are perpetually outmaneuvered, left feeling drained, confused, and fundamentally misunderstood? For years, you've probably dismissed these persistent feelings, attributing them to family drama or your own oversensitivity, perhaps even blaming yourself for the recurring sense of unease that settles deep in your gut after these encounters. You've tried to navigate the family arena with empathy, with patience, with the sincere hope of fostering genuine connection, only to find yourself repeatedly hitting an invisible wall, a frustrating barrier that seems to defy all logic and conventional emotional responses. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that invisible wall. We're going to expose a truth so unsettling, so counterintuitive to everything you've been taught about family, that most people refuse to even acknowledge its existence. This isn't about blaming or about painting anyone as a cartoon villain. This is about clarity. This is about understanding a specific, insidious pattern of behavior that consistently leaves the seeker feeling like they've just run a marathon they didn't sign up for, while others, particularly one specific archetype, walk away seemingly unscathed or even empowered. You've felt it, haven't you? That lingering sense of being taken advantage of your boundaries being gently but firmly trampled, of your emotional resources being siphoned off without your explicit consent. That feeling isn't a figment of your imagination. It's a direct response to a strategic, albeit often unconscious, dynamic at play within your family unit. The conventional wisdom, the advice you get from friends, therapists, or self-help gurus, often tells you to approach family conflicts with more empathy, more understanding, more open communication. But what if those very tools, your most admirable qualities, are precisely what disarm you in these specific conflicts? What if your desire for harmony, your willingness to see the best in people, your emotional investment in the family narrative are precisely the vulnerabilities that are being exploited? This isn't a typical family squabble we're talking about. This is a different kind of game, one where the rules are unwritten, the stakes are your emotional well-being, and one player often operates with an entirely different playbook. They don't play by the rules of conventional emotional engagement. They don't respond to guilt or shame or appeals to shared history in the way you might expect. They navigate the family arena with a chillingly effective detachment, often cloaked in superficial charm, a veneer of concern, or even the guise of being the peacemaker. We're here to unveil what we call the hidden psychopathic trait that grants this unfair advantage. Let's be absolutely clear. We are not here to offer clinical diagnoses. We are not labeling individuals in a medical sense. Instead, we are describing a cluster of behaviors, a specific mindset, a way of interacting with a world that mirrors certain psychopathic adjacent tendencies. Think of it as a strategic operating system, a cold, calculated detachment that allows an individual, whom we will refer to as the architect, to navigate complex emotional landscapes without being burdened by the very emotions that cripple the seeker. The architect possesses an uncanny ability to identify emotional blind spots, not just in the seeker, but in the unwitting participants as well. Those other family members who, due to their own emotional investments, traditional beliefs, or simply a lack of awareness, inadvertently enable the architect or become collateral damage in their subtle machinations. The architect operates with a calculated disregard for others' boundaries, a lack of genuine empathy that allows them to make decisions purely based on self-interest, and a manipulative streak that can turn any family discussion into a strategic game of chess. They excel at shifting blame, playing the victim, or subtly turning family members against each other, all while maintaining an outward appearance of normalcy, even benevolence. This isn't about overt aggression. It's far more insidious. It's about a consistent pattern of leaving you, the seeker, feeling gaslit, confused, and questioning your own sanity. You might recall countless instances, the holiday dinner where you felt subtly undermined, the decision about an aging parent that left you feeling unheard, the financial discussion where you felt pressured into an unfavorable outcome. These weren't random occurrences. They were manifestations of this hidden trait at work. The good news, the seeker, is that once you identify this pattern, once you understand the playbook, you can begin to inoculate yourself against its effects. You can retreat into your inner sanctum, that private mental space where self-reflection and strategic analysis are cultivated, and begin to develop a new set of defenses. This isn't about fighting fire with fire or becoming like the architect. It's about understanding the game so you can stop being a pawn. It's about recognizing the subtle cues, the emotional traps, and the manipulative tactics that have historically disarmed you. If you've ever walked away from family gathering feeling utterly bewildered, like you just ran a marathon you didn't sign up for, emotionally exhausted, and questioning why you even bother, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you felt that persistent, nagging frustration that no matter how much effort you put in, no matter how much you try to communicate, you just can't seem to gain solid ground in certain family relationships, then this message is for you. You are not alone, and your feelings are valid. You are not too sensitive. You are simply responding to a dynamic that most people are ill-equipped to handle because they lack the specific lens we're about to give you. Prepare yourself, because what we're about to uncover will not only validate your unspoken frustrations, but will also empower you with a new, strategic clarity to navigate the most complex and emotionally charged relationships in your life. The quiet desperation you've felt, the gnawing sense that something is fundamentally off in your most intimate circles, isn't a figment of your imagination or a sign of your inadequacy. Instead, it's a direct consequence of interacting within a specific, often insidious, dynamic that plays out repeatedly in the family arena. Consider the classic American holiday gathering, maybe Thanksgiving dinner, where the aroma of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie should signify warmth and unity. Yet, year after year, the scene unfolds with a familiar, unsettling rhythm. There's always one individual, the architect, who subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, steers every conversation, dominates the emotional landscape, and ensures the spotlight remains firmly fixed upon them. Perhaps they interrupt others mid-sentence, dismissing contributions with a wave of a hand or a dismissive chuckle. They might recount anecdotes where they are the perpetual hero or victim, effortlessly drawing sympathy or admiration, while the genuine achievements or struggles of others, including the seeker, are conveniently overlooked or downplayed. The conversation might pivot to a topic where the architect holds an opinion, and suddenly, dissenting views are met with a chilling calm that silences rather than engages. The unwitting participants, caught in the undertow of tradition and a desire for peace, might nervously laugh along or change the subject, inadvertently reinforcing the architect's control. You, the seeker, might find yourself biting your tongue, a carefully crafted argument dying on your lips, or a heartfelt story remaining untold, all to avoid the inevitable clash or the feeling of being steamrolled. The discomfort isn't just about differing opinions. It's about a deeper, systemic imbalance of power, a feeling that your voice, your perspective, and even your very presence are secondary to another's agenda. Or perhaps the scenario isn't a boisterous holiday feast, but a more hushed, high-stakes discussion, like the division of an inheritance. This is where the true colors of certain dynamics often emerge with stark clarity. The family arena transforms into a negotiation table, but one where the rules are constantly shifting and the emotional stakes are astronomically high. The architect, with a practiced ease, might employ a strategy of emotional blackmail, hinting at past sacrifices, manufacturing a narrative of unfairness against themselves, or even subtly threatening to withdraw affection or support if their demands aren't met. After all I've done for this family, they might lament, it's only fair that I receive the lion's share, given my unique circumstances. This isn't just about money or property. It's about control, about leveraging guilt and obligation to secure an advantage. The seeker, often burdened by a deep-seated desire for fairness and a reluctance to engage in open conflict, finds themselves trapped. They might feel an overwhelming sense of guilt for even considering challenging the architect, believing that family harmony, however fragile, is paramount. This insidious manipulation can extend beyond grand events, seeping into the mundane fabric of daily life. It manifests as a constant, low-level hum of subtle gaslighting that chips away at the seeker's self-worth and perception of reality. You might express a feeling, a memory, or an observation, only to be met with a blank stare, a dismissive laugh, or the infamous, "that never happened, you're too sensitive," or "you're imagining things." Over time, this constant invalidation creates a profound sense of confusion within the seeker's inner sanctum. You begin to doubt your own sanity, questioning your memories, your emotions, and your judgment. The world around you, especially within the family arena, starts to feel like a distorted mirror, reflecting back a version of yourself that is constantly wrong, constantly overreacting, constantly flawed. The emotional toll is immense. A pervasive sense of frustration, a crushing weight of obligation, and a deep-seated feeling of being perpetually misunderstood, no matter how clearly you articulate your feelings or how rationally you present your case. Despite your best, most earnest efforts to foster harmony, to communicate openly, to extend olive branches, the dynamic remains stubbornly unchanged. You might have tried every piece of conventional wisdom. Just talk it out, try to see things from their perspective. They mean well, deep down, or the ever-present, but they're family. Yet, these well-intentioned strategies consistently fall flat, leaving you feeling more drained, more bewildered, and more convinced that something is fundamentally broken within these relationships. The unwitting participants, perhaps out of fear of the architect's disapproval or simply a lack of awareness, often offer similar platitudes, further isolating the seeker in their struggle. This isn't just normal family squabbling or typical sibling rivalry. These aren't isolated incidents of bad temper or momentary misunderstandings. What you're experiencing are deeply entrenched patterns, a systemic imbalance driven by a specific, often unrecognized underlying dynamic. The relentless cycle of manipulation, the emotional invalidation, the constant feeling of being taken advantage of, these are not random occurrences. They are symptoms of a deeper, more calculated, albeit sometimes unconscious, strategy at play. The pain you've felt, the frustration that simmers beneath the surface, the exhaustion from constantly defending your reality, these are valid responses to a profoundly challenging environment. You are not failing. You are simply operating without the necessary tools to identify and counteract a very specific kind of advantage that someone else holds. This understanding is the first step towards reclaiming your power, towards moving beyond the cycle of confusion and self-doubt that has plagued your interactions within the family arena. The frustration you've carried, the sense of being unfairly treated despite your best intentions to maintain peace and connection, stems not from your own shortcomings, but from encountering a specific kind of individual who operates with a distinct, often hidden, set of psychological tools. What if the very fabric of these frustrating interactions, the reason traditional advice consistently fails, lies in a singular, potent trait that grants an almost unfair advantage to the architect? What if understanding this trait is the key to finally breaking free from the emotional chains that bind you within these family conflicts? The promise here isn't just validation, it's revelation. It's about equipping the seeker with the insight to peel back the layers of polite society and familial expectation to see the true engine driving these dynamics. Your persistent efforts to foster harmony and understanding have likely been met with a wall, not because you lack compassion or skill, but because the individual you're engaging with is operating from a fundamentally different playbook. This isn't about blaming, but about recognizing a pattern that has kept you trapped in a cycle of emotional expenditure with little return. The true breakthrough, however, lies not in merely observing the wreckage, but in fundamentally shifting the lens through which you perceive the family arena itself. For too long, you, the seeker, have likely operated under a set of unspoken rules, a sentimental contract that assumes mutual good faith and shared emotional investment within your familial unit. This is precisely where the vulnerability lies, the blind spot that the architect, with their unique psychological blueprint, has learned to exploit with uncanny precision. To truly understand the game, to reclaim your power and protect your inner sanctum, you must first shed these comforting, yet ultimately debilitating illusions. We are not advocating for a descent into cynicism, but rather an ascent to clarity, a strategic reevaluation through what we term dark nihilism. Now, before you recoil at the word nihilism, understand this is not about embracing despair or believing life is meaningless. Quite the contrary. This is a pragmatic, stripped-down view of human nature, a lens devoid of the rosy filters of sentimentality, tradition, or wishful thinking. It's about seeing people, even those closest to you, as they are, not as you desperately wish them to be. It's about acknowledging the raw, often uncomfortable truths of self-interest, power dynamics, and the inherent fragility of emotional bonds when tested by personal gain. Think of it as intellectual jujitsu, using the opponent's own momentum and assumptions against them, not out of malice, but out of absolute necessity for self-preservation. This perspective isn't a lifestyle to be adopted wholesale. It's a diagnostic tool, a tactical framework designed to cut through the emotional fog that has obscured your vision in countless family conflicts. To grasp the full weight of this paradigm shift, we must turn to a master strategist, a figure who understood the ruthless mechanics of human interaction long before modern psychology even had a name. Imagine sitting across from Niccolò Machiavelli, the Florentine diplomat whose insights into power and human nature have echoed through centuries, shaping empires and defining the very concept of strategic thinking. He wasn't advocating for evil. He was simply describing reality, the gritty, unvarnished truth of how individuals navigate a world of competing interests. Machiavelli's work, particularly The Prince, is not a guide to villainy, but a cold, hard look at effective action in a world where moral considerations often take a back seat to survival and influence. He understood that in any arena, be it a Renaissance court or the family arena, one must be prepared to see beyond superficial pleasantries to the underlying currents of ambition and self-preservation. He famously wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." While this quote might sound harsh when applied to family, its essence is profoundly relevant. Relying solely on love or assumed affection leaves you vulnerable. It underscores the critical need for respect, for boundaries, and for a strategic posture that commands a certain deference, rather than merely hoping for emotional reciprocity. This brings us to the core revelation, the hidden psychopathic trait that grants the architect their unfair advantage. Let's be unequivocally clear, we are not offering a clinical diagnosis. We are not labeling anyone as a psychopath in a medical sense. Instead, we are identifying a specific behavioral pattern, a cluster of observable actions and attitudes that, when present within the family context, mimic the strategic benefits often associated with psychopathic tendencies. This trait is characterized by three critical pillars. First, a profound lack of emotional reciprocity. While the architect might feign empathy, offer superficial apologies, or even shed crocodile tears, their actions consistently demonstrate an inability or unwillingness to genuinely share or understand the emotional experiences of others. Your pain, your frustration, your deep-seated needs are merely data points, not shared experiences. Second, there is a calculated, almost surgical use of others' vulnerabilities. The architect possesses an uncanny knack for identifying the emotional Achilles heels of the seeker and the unwitting participants. They know precisely which buttons to push, which past hurts to subtly reference, which insecurities to prod. This isn't random lashing out. It's a precise, often unconscious targeting of your soft spots. Perhaps they exploit your desire for peace, your loyalty, your financial dependence, or your deep-seated need for familial approval. They understand that your emotional investment is their greatest weapon, and they wield it with detached efficiency. They can turn your desire for a harmonious holiday gathering into a hostage situation, demanding compliance under the guise of keeping the peace. They can leverage your sense of duty regarding an aging parent into an overwhelming burden, all while maintaining a facade of helpfulness. The third pillar is an almost chilling detachment from the emotional consequences of their actions. While you, the seeker, might agonize over the fallout of a family dispute, replaying conversations in your inner sanctum, experiencing genuine guilt or regret, the architect moves on almost immediately. The emotional wreckage they leave in their wake simply doesn't register with the same intensity. They don't lose sleep over your distress. They don't feel the pang of conscience that might stop another person from making a manipulative move. This isn't necessarily malevolence in the traditional sense. It's more akin to a functional blindness to the emotional landscape of others, coupled with an acute awareness of how to navigate that landscape for personal gain. It's like watching a chess player move pieces. The pieces themselves have no feelings, only strategic value. This hidden trait thrives most potently in environments where emotional bonds are assumed to be sacred, inviolable. In a typical American family, it's expected that love, trust, and mutual respect form the bedrock of interactions. These very expectations, these deep-seated assumptions, become the fertile ground for the architect's machinations. They turn those sacred bonds into leverage, transforming your love into a tool for compliance, your trust into an open door for manipulation, and your desire for harmony into a weakness to be exploited. When you operate from a place of genuine emotional connection, expecting the same in return, you leave yourself exposed to someone who sees those connections as mere strategic assets. They aren't playing by the same rulebook, and until you realize this, you'll continue to be outmaneuvered. This is the hard truth, the unsentimental reality that you must confront. It requires courage, not to become like the architect, but to see them for what they are without the comforting veil of familial expectation. To truly understand the landscape of familial dysfunction and the subtle power plays that unfold within the family arena, the seeker must first recognize the specific manifestations of this hidden psychopathic trait. It isn't always about grand, dramatic confrontations. Often, the most damaging behaviors are the ones that slip under the radar, disguised as quirks or even misguided affection. These are the insidious emotional manipulations that, over time, erode trust and boundaries, leaving the seeker perpetually off balance and questioning their own reality. One of the most potent weapons in the architect's arsenal is the weaponization of guilt. This isn't the simple, honest regret one feels after making a mistake. It's a calculated deployment designed to control and obligate. Consider a Thanksgiving dinner, a cornerstone of American family tradition, where the architect, perhaps an aging parent, might lament, "I just wish I could see my grandchildren more often, but I understand everyone's so busy with their own lives now." This isn't a direct demand, but a masterful stroke of emotional blackmail, painting the seeker or other unwitting participants as neglectful, selfish, or ungrateful. The unspoken implication is clear. If you truly cared, you would prioritize me. This tactic is especially effective in a culture that often emphasizes filial duty and family togetherness, making it incredibly difficult for the seeker to push back without feeling like a terrible person. It's often dismissed as mom just wants to feel loved or dad's getting old. He's a little dramatic, but the underlying mechanism is a deliberate manipulation of emotional leverage. Alongside guilt, the architect often wields strategic charm. This isn't genuine warmth. It's a performance meticulously tailored to disarm, create alliances, and deflect scrutiny. Imagine the architect who might be cold and dismissive to the seeker in private, transforming into the life of the party at a family reunion, cracking jokes, offering compliments, and appearing utterly delightful to the unwitting participants. They might shower a favorite niece with lavish gifts or praise a brother-in-law's career achievements, all while subtly undermining the seeker's accomplishments or character behind closed doors. This creates a powerful smokescreen, making the seeker's complaints seem petty or unfounded to anyone who only sees the architect's charming facade. "Oh, Uncle Bob? He's such a character, always so generous," the unwitting participants might say, effectively invalidating the seeker's genuine distress and isolating them further within the family arena. The charm serves not to connect, but to control perceptions and maintain an advantageous position. Then there is the masterful art of feigned victimhood. The architect never truly takes responsibility. Instead, they pivot, casting themselves as the wrong party, perpetually suffering at the hands of others, often the seeker. A disagreement about holiday plans or an inheritance matter can quickly morph into the architect tearfully declaring, "After everything I've done for this family, this is how I'm treated? I guess I just expect too much." This elicits sympathy from the unwitting participants, who are conditioned to rush to the aid of the perceived victim. The seeker, caught in the crosshairs, is suddenly painted as the aggressor, the unfeeling antagonist, even if they were simply trying to establish a reasonable boundary or voice a legitimate concern. This tactic is particularly potent because it taps into deeply ingrained societal norms of compassion and protection for the vulnerable, effectively turning the emotional tide against the seeker. Triangulation is another insidious maneuver. The architect rarely confronts directly. Instead, they pull in the unwitting participants, creating a complex web of alliances and divisions. They might confide in one sibling about another's supposed misdeeds, or subtly pit parents against children, spreading rumors or manipulating information to sow discord. "Your sister told me you said you didn't like her new boyfriend." The architect might whisper to the seeker, knowing full well that this fabrication will cause a rift, diverting attention from their own actions and empowering them through the ensuing chaos. This keeps the family fractured, preventing a united front against the architect and ensuring their continued dominance within the family arena. It's like a twisted game of telephone, where the architect controls the initial message, ensuring it causes maximum damage. The architect also possesses an uncanny ability for selective memory. Facts, promises, and past events are conveniently reinterpreted or forgotten entirely if they contradict the architect's preferred narrative. "I never said I'd help you move that weekend. You must be mistaken," they might claim, despite explicit conversations, leaving the seeker bewildered and doubting their own recollection. This gaslighting technique is not about genuine forgetfulness. It's a strategic erasure of inconvenient truths designed to undermine the seeker's confidence and control the historical record. It leaves the seeker feeling crazy, constantly replaying conversations in their inner sanctum, trying to reconcile their memory with the architect's unwavering denial. And, of course, there is the relentless shifting of blame. Nothing is ever the architect's fault. If a family gathering goes awry, if a financial plan fails, if a conflict erupts, the blame is invariably externalized. If you hadn't brought up that argument from last year, everything would have been fine. The architect might declare, absolving themselves completely while burdening the seeker with responsibility for their own disproportionate reaction. This perpetual refusal to take accountability ensures that the architect remains pristine in their own eyes, and often in the eyes of the unwitting participants, who may be too emotionally invested or too intimidated to challenge the narrative. What makes these behaviors so difficult to confront is their profoundly covert nature. They are rarely overt acts of aggression, like a punch or a screamed insult, which are easily identifiable as harmful. Instead, they are subtle emotional jabs, veiled criticisms, and strategic omissions that erode trust and boundaries over time, like water slowly wearing down stone. They are the snide remarks disguised as humor at a family barbecue, the subtle favoritism shown at Christmas, the concerned phone calls that plant seeds of doubt about another family member. These actions are often dismissed by the unwitting participants, and even by the seeker, as just how Aunt Carol is, or Mom's way of showing she cares, even if it's a little clumsy. But the seeker, observing from their inner sanctum, begins to see the pattern, the deliberate intent beneath the veneer of normalcy. The chilling truth is that the architect often genuinely believes they are justified in their actions. They operate from a self-serving logic that bypasses genuine empathy, viewing others as extensions of themselves or as tools to achieve their own desires. This profound, often chilling, insight into their operational blueprint lays the groundwork for your first tactical advantage, the seeker. To truly master the intricate dance of family dynamics, you must first equip yourself with a perspective rarely adopted within the emotionally charged confines of the family arena. As Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, once wisely observed, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. This ancient wisdom, though centuries old, resonates with a potent truth for the modern soul grappling with the complexities of familial strife. Your journey begins by internalizing this fundamental truth, by cultivating what we call the lens of impartiality. In the swirling tempest of family conflicts, your most significant vulnerability isn't a lack of intelligence or courage. It's your deeply ingrained emotional investment. It's the implicit, often unconscious, assumption that your family members operate from a shared moral compass, that they value harmony, respect, and mutual understanding as much as you do. This assumption, while noble, becomes a fatal flaw when dealing with an individual like the architect, whose internal logic diverges so dramatically from this communal ideal. The architect thrives in the blind spots created by your empathy, your hope for reconciliation, and your desire for connection. They know, instinctively or through practiced observation, that your emotional tether to the family unit is your Achilles heel, making you susceptible to their subtle manipulations and calculated disregard. The lens of impartiality demands that you mentally step outside this emotional whirlwind, that you cease to be merely a participant and instead become an astute observer. Imagine yourself as an anthropologist, meticulously studying a foreign tribe whose customs and motivations are utterly alien to your own. You wouldn't judge their rituals. You wouldn't take their actions personally. Instead, you would document, analyze, and seek to understand the underlying patterns and functions of their behavior. Similarly, in the family arena, you must learn to observe interactions as if you were a master chess player, analyzing the board not with personal attachment to the pieces, but with a cold, calculating focus on moves, counter-moves, and strategic positioning. Each interaction, each seemingly innocuous comment, each emotional outburst from the unwitting participants becomes a data point, an observable phenomenon to be cataloged and understood rather than felt. This principle emphasizes a radical shift in focus, from perceived intentions and emotional appeals to concrete actions and tangible outcomes. Most individuals, when confronted with a family member's hurtful words or manipulative tactics, immediately dive into the emotional rabbit hole. They react with anger, hurt, defensiveness, or a desperate attempt to explain their own perspective. They get entangled in the why. Asterisk, why would mom say that? Didn't dad realize how that would make me feel? Asterisk, but the lens of impartiality teaches you to bypass this emotional trap. It encourages the seeker to ask instead, what was the action taken? What was the outcome achieved by that action? What pattern does this reveal? Consider a common scenario, a guilt trip, perhaps during a tense Thanksgiving dinner discussion about inheritance or future care for an elder. The architect might deploy a line like, I guess some people just don't care about family traditions as much as others, delivered with a sigh and a pointed glance. The typical response from the seeker, fueled by emotional investment, would be immediate self-defense. Of course I care. I just have other responsibilities right now. This reaction, however, is precisely what the architect seeks. It validates their power, pulls you into their emotional game, and deflects from the underlying agenda. With the lens of impartiality, your response shifts dramatically. Instead of reacting emotionally, you observe the pattern. You note the specific language used, the timing, the target, and the immediate effect on the unwitting participants. You recognize this as a manipulative tactic designed to induce compliance through guilt, a calculated move on the chessboard. You don't internalize the guilt. You analyze the mechanism of the guilt trip. You see the strings being pulled, not the puppets dance. This detachment allows you to remain grounded in your inner sanctum, shielded from the emotional shrapnel that often incapacitates others. You begin to understand that the architect isn't necessarily seeking an apology or genuine understanding. They're seeking control, leverage, or a specific outcome that benefits them, often at your expense. The vast majority of people caught in the emotional currents of family life remain perpetually disadvantaged. They are the ones perpetually trying to fix things, to make others understand, to mend broken bonds with genuine effort. They're the ones who get tangled in the architect's web, their emotional vulnerability exploited again and again. But a select few, those who embrace this dark nihilistic perspective, learn to see the game dispassionately. They recognize that while others are flailing in the emotional ocean, they can stand on the shore, observing the tides, understanding the currents, and planning their next move with cold, strategic clarity. This is not about becoming heartless. It's about becoming strategically resilient. It's about recognizing that in certain high-stakes familial interactions, your emotions are a liability, not an asset. By adopting the lens of impartiality, you transform yourself from a pawn vulnerable to every emotional attack into a player capable of discerning the true motivations behind the architect's every move. This detached observation will become your most potent tool, allowing you to peel back the layers of superficial charm, feigned concern, or manufactured drama to reveal the cold, calculating intent that truly drives the architect. It is only by seeing them for who they truly are, stripped of the emotional narratives you've built around them, that you can begin to truly protect yourself and reclaim your power in the family arena. Yet, merely recognizing the truth of their nature is but the first step on this arduous, yet ultimately liberating journey towards genuine self-preservation. Impartiality, as potent as it is, lays the groundwork, clearing the emotional fog that has long obscured your vision. But a clear view alone is insufficient to navigate a minefield. You need a map, a strategy, and the keen eye of scout. This brings us to Principle 2, the power of cold observation. This principle isn't about fostering indifference or becoming apathetic to the people you share a history with. Far from it. This is about cultivating a strategic detachment, a clinical gaze that allows you to analyze situations without the distorting lens of sentimentality or ingrained emotional responses. Think of it less like turning your heart to stone and more like equipping yourself with night vision goggles in a dimly lit room. You're not uncaring. You're simply seeing with an enhanced clarity that others, blinded by their own emotional investments, cannot achieve. The goal here is not to become a colder person, but a more effective one, particularly when operating within the often treacherous landscape of the family arena. To truly master this, we turn to ancient wisdom, a philosophy that has guided strategists for millennia, from boardroom battles in Silicon Valley to the gridiron of the NFL. Sun Tzu, in his timeless treatise, The Art of War, famously declared, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." While your family members are not your enemies in the conventional sense, within the context of the emotional skirmishes that define your conflicts, the architect operates as an adversary to your peace and autonomy. Therefore, this adage becomes profoundly relevant. Knowing yourself in this scenario means understanding your own triggers, your vulnerabilities, the emotional buttons the architect has learned to press with surgical precision. It means acknowledging your deep-seated desire for familial harmony, for acceptance, for love, and how those very desires can be weaponized against you. Knowing your enemy, or in our case, the architect, means dissecting their behavioral patterns, their preferred tactics, and the predictable outcomes of their actions. It means transforming from a reactive participant to a proactive observer, a psychological profiler within your own family unit. This isn't about judgment. It's about data collection. Just as a forensic analyst meticulously gathers evidence at a crime scene, you, the seeker, must begin to meticulously document, either mentally or in a private journal, the recurring behaviors, the subtle tells, the specific triggers, and the favored manipulation tactics of the architect. This is your personal intelligence gathering mission, conducted from the safe distance of your inner sanctum. This process demands a shift in focus. Instead of getting swept away by the immediate emotional impact of an interaction, the sting of a cutting remark, the frustration of being misunderstood, the familiar surge of guilt, you must train yourself to observe what is actually said, how it is said, and critically what happens next. It's about stepping back, taking a breath, and analyzing the sequence of events as if you were watching a movie. What was the exact phrasing used? What was the tone of voice? What nonverbal cues accompanied the words? And how did the situation invariably unfold after that specific interaction? Consider the subtle, yet pervasive, patterns that have likely plagued your family interactions for years. Perhaps you've noticed how certain topics, like discussions about shared financial responsibilities or holiday plans, invariably lead to an argument where the architect casts themselves as the put-upon martyr or subtly shifts blame onto you. Document this. Note the specific phrases they use to deflect accountability. Is it, "You always make such a big deal out of nothing," or "I was just trying to help, but you always twist my words"? Maybe it's the classic American passive-aggressive, "bless your heart," delivered with a saccharine smile that masks a razor-sharp insult. These are not random occurrences. They are part of a carefully honed, often unconscious, repertoire. Another common pattern to track is selective memory. Does the architect conveniently forget promises made, agreements reached, or even entire arguments that contradict their current narrative? Do they rewrite history to suit their present agenda, leaving you feeling like you're losing your mind, questioning your own recollection of events? This gaslighting technique is a powerful tool in their arsenal, designed to erode your confidence and make you doubt your own perceptions. By documenting these instances, you create an irrefutable record, a personal truth that cannot be swayed by their manipulative narratives. You might notice how every time you bring up a past transgression, they pivot to a time you made a mistake, no matter how unrelated, effectively shutting down any attempt at honest reconciliation. This isn't just a bad memory. It's a strategic maneuver. Pay close attention to their preferred manipulation tactics. Is it guilt-tripping, where they leverage your sense of obligation or love to get their way? Is it triangulation, where they draw in the unwitting participants to create a united front against you, making you feel isolated and outnumbered? Perhaps it's feigned ignorance, a disingenuous, "Oh, I didn't realize it would upset you," even after years of you expressing the exact same boundary. These aren't isolated incidents. They are threads in a tapestry of manipulation, and once you start pulling on them, the entire pattern begins to unravel. Observe how they might use superficial charm to disarm others, only to deliver a veiled jab at you when no one else is fully paying attention. It's like watching a magician perform. Once you know how the trick works, the illusion loses its power. The profound realization that emerges from this cold observation is that the architect's behaviors are, in fact, remarkably predictable. Once stripped of the emotional chaos they create, their actions fall into discernible patterns, like the predictable trajectory of a baseball pitch once you understand the pitcher's mechanics. The seeker who remains perpetually surprised by familiar family dynamics, who constantly feels blindsided and emotionally drained by the same old arguments, is the one who has failed to observe. They are caught in a reactive loop, always responding to the last punch, never anticipating the next. They're like a football team that keeps running the same play into a brick wall, expecting a different outcome. But you, equipped with the power of cold observation, can transcend this reactive state. You move from being a pawn on the chessboard to understanding the game itself. You begin to anticipate the architect's moves, not with fear, but with strategic foresight. You can prepare your emotional defenses, develop strategic responses, or, most powerfully, choose preemptive disengagement. If you know that every holiday gathering will inevitably feature a thinly veiled critique of your career choices, you could decide to limit your exposure, redirect the conversation, or simply let the comments wash over you, knowing they're not about you, but about the architect's own insecurities or need for control. This shift from constant surprise to informed anticipation is where your true power lies. It's the difference between being a deer in headlights and a seasoned hunter who knows the terrain. This meticulous documentation and detached analysis isn't merely an academic exercise. It is the vital bridge that moves you from observation to strategic non-engagement. Once you can reliably predict the storm, you gain the agency to decide how you will respond. You can choose to weather it, to reroute around it entirely, or, perhaps most effectively, to simply stay home, protecting the sanctity of your inner sanctum. The goal is not to win every battle in the family arena, for many of these battles are unwinnable by traditional means. The true victory lies in controlling your participation, your emotional investment, and ultimately, your peace of mind. You're no longer bound by the invisible chains of expectation and emotional manipulation. You are free to choose. This journey we've embarked upon, from exposing the hidden psychopathic trait to arming you with the dark nihilistic lens, and now, the power of cold observation, is a testament to your innate strength and your courageous commitment to self-preservation. You are no longer the unwitting participant, nor are you indefinitely vulnerable to the architect's machinations. You are the seeker, transformed into a strategist, capable of navigating the most complex and emotionally charged landscapes with clarity and resolve. Your inner sanctum, once a place of mere reflection, has become a fortress built upon knowledge, detachment, and an unshakable commitment to your own well-being. This is not about malice. It is about empowerment. It is about reclaiming your narrative, your energy, and your life. You deserve peace, and now, you possess the tools to forge it for yourself, regardless of the turbulent currents of the family arena. If this deep dive into the often unseen dynamics of family conflict resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition or illuminated a path forward, then please hit that like button to let us know. Share your thoughts, your experiences, and your own observations in the comments below. Have you recognized these patterns in your own life? Your insights contribute to a community of seekers on a similar path. And for more strategic insights into navigating the complex psychology of human relationships and reclaiming your power, make sure to subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. Your journey toward empowered self-preservation begins now, and we're here to guide you every step of the way.